Assalamu alaikum and welcome to English class with Kaisar Bashir. The students and dear viewers, like the previous video, today's video is also going to be very important and very helpful for you. Because in today's video, we are going to discuss the very important literary devices that the poet Alfred Tennyson has used in his beautiful poem, The Brook. But before we get into the video, I would like to tell you, keep ready your notebook, pen or pencil so that you can write down all the necessary and important details about the poem that I am going to be sharing with you through this video. Now, without wasting much of our time, let's get going. Dear students, the first poetic device that the poet has used in the poem is personification. Well, what is personification? Personification is actually giving human qualities, characteristics, traits, or human form to inanimate or non-human objects. Let me make it simple for you. When a poet or a writer gives human qualities like laughing, talking, smiling, thinking, telling a story, narrating a tale to non-human or non-living things like stones, trees, water, clouds, sky, air, etc., it's called personification. Dear students and dear viewers, in this poem entitled The Brook, the poet has personified the brook. Because when we go through the poem, we see that the brook is narrating us her story like an expert storyteller. It doesn't seem that it's actually non-living or non-human. It seems as if the brook is living thing telling us a story, right? So when writers make non-human things or non-living things speak, we call that personification. And in this poem entitled The Brook, the poem from the very beginning seems live because it is the speaker, I, that is the brook, that is talking, that's narrating her tale. Okay? And in the second place, the poet personifies the sunbeam, right? Because sunbeam is also non-human. And the poet, through the mouth of the brook, tells, I make the netted sunbeam dance. Because it's not the quality of the sunbeam or the sun ray to dance. Whose quality it is? It is the quality, is the trait of a human being, right? So when the traits of human beings are given to non-human or non-living things, we call that personification. Dear students, the second poetic device that the poet has used in the poem is called alliteration. What is alliteration? Well, alliteration is actually the rhythmic repetition of consonant sounds, especially at the beginning of words in a poetic line. When a poet uses consonant sounds at the beginning of some words in a poetic line, it's called alliteration. In the poem The Brook, the poet has used this device in abundance, right? Now the question is, why do poets use alliteration? Well, the answer is very simple. They use alliteration in order to make their poetry more engaging, more beautiful, melodious, musical, and powerful. Dear students, before I give you examples from the poem, let me give you an example that will help you to identify whether the poet really has used this device called alliteration in his poem or not. So the example goes like this: Simran sells seashells by the seashore. In this poetic line, the poet has repeated sound S and sound sh, right? As you can see, Simran sells C. So S sound is repeated. Once again, sh and sh sound is repeated, right? So when poets repeat consonant sounds like this in a poetic line, we call that alliteration, right? Now let's look at a few examples from the poem itself. As you can see, haunt and heard. In this line, the poet has repeated the consonant sound h. In the second line, as you can see, sudden Sally, the poet has repeated the sound s. And in the third line, as you can see, the poet has repeated the sound, consonant sound b. And the third poetic device that the poet has used in the poem is onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. What is onomatopoeia? Well, it's actually a word that sounds like the action or the object that it refers to, like hiss, buzz, splash, right? So these are actually the examples of alliteration. Buzz, hiss, splash, right? So splash is associated with water, hiss is associated with the sound of the snack, and buzz is actually the sound of the bee. As you can see here, the bee buzzed in my ear. So this word buzz is actually the onomatopoeic sound, right? Similarly, in the poem, we have some words which refer or represent the water, that is chatter, bubble, and babble. These are the actions that refer to water. The students, the fourth technique that the poet has used in the poem is imagery. You know, without imagery, I think a poem is not a poem. And this device has been used by the poets a lot, widely, in abundance. And this technique is actually used to evoke or create mental images. And this technique actually helps writers, poets to communicate their ideas, to communicate their concepts clearly. Therefore, this is a very important technique and has to be used, should be used, must be used by poets. And when we talk of the poem, the Brook, the poet has used this technique profusely. As you can see, the words like brook, coot, hern, fern, valley, hills, ridge, bridge, foamy flake, silver water, golden grave, lusty trout, etc., etc. All these are actually the images that the poet has used in the poem. And these images make the poem Brook more evocative, more beautiful, more powerful, as it not only takes us on a trip to the other world, but it also makes us realize how beautiful nature is. Therefore, using imagery is a must for a poet to make his poem look more pictorial, look more beautiful, look more powerful. Dear students, the fifth technique that the poet has used in the poem is refrain. A refrain is actually a phrase or a group of words repeated at key intervals in a poem. Dear students, there's a poet from Kashmir, Rusul Mir. He has written a poem, a wonderful poem that ends with a beautiful refrain, that is Mechmure Lalwanar. Similarly, in the poem The Brook, a beautiful and musical phrase is repeated, And the phrase goes like this: men may come and men may go, but I go on forever. Dear students, this phrase is not only important as far as theme of the poem is concerned, but this phrase gives music to the poem, makes this poem more melodious. Dear students, the last but not the least poetic device that the poet has used in the poem is extended metaphor. What is extended metaphor? To understand extended metaphor better, we need to understand metaphor. Metaphor is actually a comparison between two dissimilar objects without using words like, as, then, etc. to make the comparison, right? So two unlike entities are compared without using these words. For example, mind is an ocean. Here, mind has been compared with the ocean. Mind is a different entity, and ocean is also a different entity. But there's a similar quality in both, and that is depth. Their depth, right? Mind is quite different from ocean, but they are similar in depth, as no instrument has so far been made or invented to gauge the intelligence of a human being, right? So here the mind has been compared with the ocean, as it's not possible for human beings to measure the depth of an ocean. Similarly, it's not possible for human beings to measure the depth of the human mind. Dear students, when this type of a comparison is extended through multiple lines, stanzas, pages, or sometimes an entire work of art, that's called extended metaphor. In the poem, journey of the brook is compared to the journey of a human being, and in order to make readers understand this comparison, the poet has used the journey of the brook in order to understand, or not to make readers understand the concept, the reality, or the existential reality of a human being. Dear students, this was all about today's video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.